Hey everybody, I'm Julian. I've been a model student for as long as I could remember. Really good grades in high school, really good grades at Berkeley, I graduated in 3 years, and I got good scores at NYU Law and then at Harvard Law School where I graduated from eventually. I wanted to take a minute to talk to you guys about the various study techniques, disciplines, work ethics, and strategies that I used in my time as a student that I think could be helpful for anyone who's trying to better their GPA or play the game, as it were, to get the best grades possible. And also, as a quick reminder, it would mean a ton if you guys subscribe to our channel. It's free, costs you nothing, takes 3 seconds. Thank you. The first pillar of being a good student, and this goes well beyond just academics, is time management. How are you managing your time? What is your approach to scheduling your days and figuring out when you're going to get things done? Time management is not only helpful to learn and understand and implement as a student, it's going to be part of your life when you enter the workforce, it's going to be part of your life when you have a family, and honestly, it's never going to go away because in the world that we live in that is increasingly complex and fragmented, learning how to manage your time is going to be your key to getting what you want out of every single day. As a threshold matter, when you apply time management to studying techniques, the most important thing you can do as a student to give yourself the best shot at getting that A+, that 110%, get things done early. The earlier you get something done, the more time your brain has to process it, the more time you will have to review the material, and the better you are going to understand it in preparation for the exam or the homework assignment or whatever it is that's graded. Look, we've all been there. It's the night before an exam and we are struggling to figure out this last concept that we put off learning forever, right? And sometimes it works out. We walk into the exam the next day, we clutch it and we get that score back and we miraculously got that question right that we thought we were gonna get wrong because we learned it the night before. But let me tell you, I've had so many exams in my career where I will finish studying for the midterm or the final a couple of days before the exam and I'll have reviewed everything, one time over at least, so that the last couple of days, it's really just time to hammer out those fine details for the things that I kind of understand but don't really. And you compare that to the exams that I've taken where I'm behind a little bit, or I procrastinated, or I just didn't care, like during my 3L year at Harvard, and I am learning everything for basically the first time like 2 weeks before the exam. There's no way that that's the same version of me walking into those exams, because the version of me that has prepared earlier, I know left, right, up, and down. I know everything, the material inside and out. The version of me that studied at the last minute, I barely remember the first sentence of the class, right? And so I think it's very important to hold yourself accountable to getting things done on time and early, because that's really the only way that you're going to truly give yourself the best shot at learning and understanding the material before you are tested on it. The question arises, how does one manage their time, right? It's easier said than done. And I say this right now as a solopreneur who has like 15 different ventures going on. Half of my days are unstructured, the other half are total chaos. It's not easy and everyone needs to find what works for them. There's different ways of scheduling out time or making things work for you. For example, for me, I have found that creating a to-do list of things in my day is the most effective way for me to figure out what is it that I want to get done, and let me just go get it done now. So I have 5 things to do each day. I don't necessarily schedule time for them. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. That works for me. For some people, it's scheduling the entire day and the entire week ahead. Every single hour is booked with some sort of designated time. I think that that is effective as well. But no matter what you do, what's important with time management is to at least start trying somewhere. Because if you live in a completely unstructured world and environment, nothing's ever going to change and you're going to continue being unproductive. But if you can just schedule one thing a week, just 1 hour of studying every Saturday or Sunday or Thursday, it doesn't matter. 1 5-minute meditation every 3 days, like whatever it is, start small, see what resonates with you and what you like the most, and go from there. One last point on time management. It's not just about scheduling your time and getting things done. It's also about thinking about where are you putting your time and energy and resources. I can't tell you the number of stories of friends and colleagues and just kids that I hear about who are at UC Berkeley, Harvard Law School, who take on so many extracurriculars and clubs and organizations that they're overwhelmed with how much work all of those things are that they don't get time to really focus on their academics. And naturally what happens? Their grades suffer because they don't have as much time and energy to put into the academics. And listen, academics, it is a 1-for-1 correlation. How much time and energy you put in is going to pay off on the exam scores, on your performance, etc., etc. So when you think about time management, also think about at a macro level, are you prioritizing school? Because if you're not really prioritizing school, you shouldn't really expect to get the best grades ever. And that's an unfortunate reality. I know it can sound like common sense, But with the hundreds of people I have seen make this mistake at the highest level of academia, I can tell you, it's not as common as you think for people to be very, very strategic in where they are prioritizing their time. Now let's talk about the practice of studying itself. Because studying, I don't think is anyone's favorite thing to do. No one really wakes up. I mean, some people might, just super excited to read like 100 pages of economics or cellular biology. At the same time, studying is the meat of where you're going to learn, how you're going to learn, and especially in college nowadays and law school, graduate school, a lot of learning is self-directed. The professor is going to give you the high-level points, but you're really on your own a lot of the time. And so that's why it's very important that we learn how to study effectively. That's what we're going to talk about now. The first thing I want you to think about when you think about approaching studying, where do you study most productively? Because people study in different ways. There's no right or wrong here. Everyone needs to find what works for them. And I think we can get locked into this narrative of I must study in the library, I must study at home by myself, I must study in a cafe. Try out different things for you and see where you're most productive. The reality is, I think a mix is good. Sometimes for me, the library was really good. Most of the time, it was just me at home on my own with my desk, and that was where I was most productive because I just didn't have distractions. For a cafe studying, I never really got a ton done in those cafe settings. It was a lot of fun. I saw a lot of really pretty drinks that were made, but didn't really get a lot of work done. So think about where is it that you're most productive and try to focus your studying time in those locations. Now, everyone has had those moments when they're studying that they find themselves 10 minutes deep into a YouTube video or scrolling Meta or Instagram or Reddit or whatever it is. There are so many distractions in today's world, and our attention spans collectively have been completely fried that there's always going to be distractions. So let's talk about the second most important thing when you're studying, which is removing distractions and keeping yourself focused. Get rid of distractions. I cannot emphasize this point enough. If you know that something is distracting you, texting on your laptop or Facebook or Instagram, whatever it is, delete the app, log out of it, block it, turn Wi-Fi off on your laptop so you cannot text people. Whatever it is, I bet you there's a way to get rid of the distraction. And if you need to lock yourself in a room completely naked with nothing but the textbook and the pencil, well, that's the world we're in. If that's what it takes for you to focus, then by all means, do it. Because we have a tendency to let ourselves off easy when it comes to distractions all the time. And, oh, no, I'll be able to control myself. Guess what? You won't be able to control yourself. The simplest way to remove and stop yourself from getting distracted is to get rid of the possibility that your brain can even latch onto the stimuli itself. So as often as you can, remember, even if it's just temporarily, remove the distractions entirely. A couple of high-level tips on this point. If Facebook is something you're still using, I don't know, people out there maybe do, use the block newsfeed Google Chrome extension. No, this is not sponsored, but if you're seeing this, I want my money. If you are on your laptop, turn off Wi-Fi. If you're taking notes with your textbook or whatever else. If you're somewhere out and something keeps distracting you in the area, if you're at a park, get up and go somewhere else. Whatever it is, accept that you cannot control what you cannot control, and sometimes that's our own attention span, and that's okay, but you gotta manage it. Then it comes down to studying itself. And let me be very clear, there's no one right way to study for any course or for any subject. However, you must always remember that in the academic sphere that we're in, you're going to be graded primarily based on what the professor is teaching you. So if it's organic chemistry and your professor really loves talking about a particular subject area and then glosses over a lot of the things that you think are very important, but you still want to learn it. So you go to Khan Academy, learn all these important concepts that you know are going to be on the MCAT, right? That's great. But remember that the exam is going to be based on what the professor is saying. And that's the stuff you want to focus on the most. And this goes well beyond the sciences. If you're in economics, if you're in political science, whatever it is that you're in, the readings are important and you should do them. The textbooks are important and you should always stay on top of your work. There's no substitute for hard work when it comes to academics. So of course, when you're studying, keep in mind all of this advice, you have to actually do the work, right? I hope that much is clear. But on top of that, I want you to remember you need to focus on what the professor is talking about and what the professor is choosing to highlight, because those are the things that most likely the professor is going to be testing you on later. And of course, that is where your grade a lot of the time is made up from. Mental health is incredibly important when you're studying. Make sure you give yourself breaks. Sometimes I use the Pomodoro technique of 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. Other times I'll do 3 hours on, an hour off. Sometimes I'll take half of a day off. I'll do a day on. Whatever it is for you, make sure you're giving yourself time to process. Your brain is a muscle like everything else. If you want it to succeed, if you want the information to actually be stored in there, you need to give it time to rest before running it again. I used to always be afraid of taking breaks. During my 1L year, I'll give you one data point here. I worked so hard my first semester. I took one day off essentially the entire semester. I worked probably 80 to 100 hour weeks every single week studying. I got good scores, right? Very good. Pretty much all A's, I had one A minus. Second semester comes around, I get an Xbox One. This is a lot of fun. I start playing Star Wars Battlefront. I'm having a great time. My mental health was in a better place. I had more time to relax. I had more time to myself. I worked hard, but I also made time to take a break. And guess what? I had a better GPA my second semester at NYU Law School than my first. One anecdotal data point for you, but when you have those moments of panic where you're like, oh my God, I can't take a break, I'm so behind, just remember, a break is part of the process of studying. It's part of the process. Which brings me to study groups. Because study groups and studying with friends, I think social studying is very much a real thing in the academic world, and I've been in my fair share of study groups, but I wanted to touch on this real quick because I think it's important for everyone to approach study groups with their own perspective of what am I really gaining from this time studying with other people. The pattern that I saw a lot in college was that people liked studying with other people mainly because it's kind of fun. You're hanging out, you're shooting the shit, you're buying boba, and you're talking about gossip while you're studying calculus, and it's fine, right? But is that really the most productive use of your time? Would you be better off studying at home on your own? And I'm not saying you shouldn't ever study with people, no. But I know a lot of people who only ever studied with other people around them, and they never had that time of deep focus that is really necessary to understand and learn the material. And that's very important. One way you can think about using a study group to your advantage. Join study groups when you think that they are going to discuss topics that you're maybe a little bit weaker on, right? Go to study groups when you think that you have a master and a handle on the material well enough that you can go and actually teach other students and your friends about the material, because they say that the most effective way to truly understand something is to actually teach it. And so if you can do that, you're in a pretty good place. So let's talk about strategies for exam taking now. Because studying is going to get you all the way to the finish line, but you need to knock it out of the park when you take that exam. And so I want to talk about a few of the tips and tricks that I've implemented over the years that I found were the most helpful for acing my exams. This is almost like a cheat code for exams, no matter what level you are at, high school, college, law school, whatever it is. Take all of the practice midterms or practice exams that your professors have posted on their website, or that you can even dig up on the internet. Sometimes the professor doesn't post it, but you can Google around and you can find older exams that the professor didn't even give you access to. Why is this important? Well, first of all, this is the closest thing to the actual exam you're going to get, because the practice exam usually mirrors, for the most part, the format, the style of the questions that the professor asks. But more importantly than that, professors aren't really the most creative people. A lot of the times, they'll have like one or two sorts of challenge questions that spin topics in a way that's more difficult, more theoretical, and they'll just change the numbers from like one year's exam to the next year, or they'll use one that was 3 years ago, and they're like, ha ha ha, no one's gonna think that I'm going 3 years back. Well, guess what? If you've reviewed all of the practice exams you can possibly find, you have. And I can't tell you the number of times for exams in law or economics or high school that I have looked at past exams by professors, seen a type of question that I'd never seen before on the practice exam, a week before I'm taking the midterm, and then I walk into the midterm and I see the exact same question, but just with different numbers. And I'm like, well, I would have been completely blindsided if I didn't do all that Googling before, but because I did, I've seen this before, and this is now, well, hopefully it's easy for me, sometimes it's not, but in any event, that's the best way to prepare. It's the most strategic way to prepare because it's out there. You just have to go and dig and find the information a lot of the time. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that you should take every practice exam as if it's the real thing. Like, you don't need to do the 3 hours sitting there with your earplugs in and make it a whole serious thing. For me, I usually just ran through the questions of the practice exams and made sure I understood them, made sure I could maybe do them if they were challenging. Understanding them is the most important piece. So I think it depends on the person and type of learner you are. For me, going through piece by piece and figuring them out was fine, and reading the answers sometimes without even doing the rough draft was fine. I do think if you have all the time in the world, the perfect way to do it is to actually simulate the test-taking environment, take the test, 3 hours for the midterm, whatever it is, and then review your answers. But again, that's going to take a lot of time. And what's more important than like simulating the testing environment for midterms is just learning the material. Also, make sure you're awake during the exams. And I don't just mean awake like I'm here and I'm present. I mean awake like you are ready, you are active, you are like, let's go, let's crush this thing, right? So I would take coffee during my exams in undergrad and law school. I normally don't drink coffee, but at the time, that was the one moment where I let myself, because I really wanted to be energized. I really wanted to be focused. I wanted to make sure that I was on my A game. Because of course, when your grade is disproportionately weighted towards the exams and the scores that you get on them, that's when it matters that you are present. Which brings me to my last point here, which is a holistic piece of advice for you in the academic world. You need to play the game, okay? Sometimes homework is worth 0% of your grade. Sometimes it's worth 100% of your grade. Sometimes it's worth 50. Whatever makes up your grade, that is where you need to put your focus. In college, a lot of the times, homework is very, very little of your holistic grade, usually like 10, maybe 20%, and then exams are the rest, 70 to 80%, right? So usually it's exams, but in high school, a lot of it is just homework. Get the work done. Just do it, right? Discipline, Nike, just do it, whatever. Nike's not paying me. Nike, you owe me. You gotta focus on the things that actually make up your grade. Don't get caught up in the little details. Don't get caught up in the nuanced debates. If your goal is to get a good grade in the class, focus on the things that make up your grade and optimize for getting the best grade. At the end of the day, there's no substitute for hard work. Many people, when they see my resume, think that I'm one of the smartest people ever in the universe. But let me tell you, I do not think I am that smart. And I'm not saying that to be humble. You can ask my closest friends. I would put myself at maybe the top 20th percentile of intelligence, okay? But certainly not the top 1%, certainly not the top 5%. The thing that separates me and has separated me from folks in high school and in college and in law school was the work ethic. And if you know my story, you know that my work ethic was not healthy, right? My work ethic was not balanced. My mental health was not focused. I was not doing a good job managing my mental health. So I'm not saying that you should do what I did at all. Learn from my mistakes, but just understand at the same time that hard work and discipline, no matter what you are studying, there's no substitute for it. And there's no YouTube video that I can give you or anyone else can give you out there that's going to give you that information, that processing, and that understanding that only you can glean from doing the work of sitting there and reading and writing and analyzing and thinking. It's a lot of thinking. And in our world where attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, it can be very hard, and I understand that. But what's important is that you start somewhere. And once you start, you try to build from where you're beginning to do it twice a week, 3 times a week, etc., etc. No road is perfect, but all that matters is that you get started. If you're trying as hard as you can and you're hitting a wall, you feel like something isn't connecting, please understand that there may be mental health things that are out of your control that are preventing you from learning. As one quick story, I had a close friend of mine who tried as hard as they could for years in high school. They could never understand and focus. Turns out they had undiagnosed ADHD. During college, they began treating it and managing it. They soared to the top of their class. They transferred to one of the best universities in California. And now they're a medical student, they're about to be a doctor, they're incredibly successful, but there are thousands of people out there who don't know that there are things out of their control preventing them from learning. So please understand, if you're trying and you're so frustrated because you can't figure it out, join our Discord, okay? Join our TikTok community. We will brainstorm with you, and let's try to figure out what's going on if you're getting frustrated. That's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Please make sure to subscribe. I can't emphasize this enough. As a content creator, this is the thing that keeps me going. Seeing the love from you guys, seeing our family grow. It takes you 3 seconds. It's free. I really hope to see you guys around on one of my Twitch streams. Check out my calendar on my Twitch page below to see when I'm going live. Hopefully I'll see you soon. If you want advice, if you want coaching, if you want to just talk mental health, catch me on one of my streams. Much love as always. Thank you.